So for as long as that explanation was, it's actually fairly simple to use. I'm going to go back to that frame we've been using, 72. And, didn't mean to turn that on, but who cares. So on the basic liquid, we have vorticity waves. So we just simply turn that on. Let's see what that gets us right out of the gate. Oh, I know. I have 13 days left to record this lesson before I run out of indie license forever. I'm sure I'll just renew it. Okay. So by default, we're getting something. It looks like we are. We can see especially right here. This kind of detail is easier to see with a more full resolution render. Right now we're doing low quality settings in the interactive render, so it's a little grainy. It's a little hard to see, but you can see that something is happening anyway. We can also see that it's only happening in certain areas. And that's because, of course, it's being limited to these high vorticity areas. I think there's something to be said for that, of not doing it everywhere. You can see it's doing it here also, which, you know, all the areas that you would expect it to be high vorticity. You can see it's breaking up the light, if you will. I kind of like seeing it everywhere, or being fairly aggressive with it. So I'm going to say, if you were moving kind of at all, like if you have a speed of 1, I mean, moving at all would be 0. So I'm going to say if you really are going very slowly for some reason, like you're pooling up somewhere, maybe along the sides, then maybe don't do it. But otherwise, 1 to 5. You know, if we were to look at, you know, to visualize back on the geometry, our vorticity, we could once again find a specific range for it. But in general, I think it's a good idea to leverage vorticity waves kind of all over the place. It does a pretty good job. It's a little tricky. It's a little tricky in that it is, you know, it can make some visual artifacting, some like dark spots that seem a little odd, but again, they tend to be blurred out with motion blur, and as long as you don't go any higher, I'd say, than 0.1 on the wave scale, or the wave height rather, it's not so bad. So you can see that, especially like here, it breaks it all up. Now the net result is that your scene is darker. It doesn't usually really add any new areas to have light reflect off of, because ultimately the rays hit the geometry based on where the geometry is. Meaning, like, we're not literally creating a new peak to catch light that wasn't there before. So it's mostly just going to break up light that is already there, with a net result of it being a little bit darker, as you can see. Especially over here, apparently. But nonetheless, it does do a pretty decent job, I'd say, to make things look more high-res. Again, especially when it's in motion, because now all these little highlights are just smaller, which gives the impression that there's more smaller features. So that's cool. I'll snapshot that and save it. You can save these to disk, you know. If you go to any given frame, you can click on this thing, and it will save the snap name, frame number, into a folder for you. So that's kind of fun. Let me show you it behaving poorly, though. If you were to go to wave height like 1, you get all this horribleness. So this is the kind of thing we're trying to stay away from. It's doing it. Like, you can see a lot of detail now. Like, it's literally doing what we ask it to do. Like, look at all that detail now in all of these places. So it works, but it looks horrible because the lighting calculations are just basically broken now. They just don't know what to do. So that's kind of fun. It doesn't take much to get there, really. If you do 0.5, you'll actually start to see it break down. So 0.1, you know, you can only really add so much detail with this anyway. So 0.1's pretty good, though. I mean, it really does a pretty good job. Like, especially like right here. Look at that. I mean, that's much nicer. Hey, another siren. So there you go. So that's vorticity waves. Works pretty good. You have these maps again where you can alter it. You don't really need to change anything else on here. So if you like, you could render another, or I know you didn't do it before, but one could render out the full frame range now. I'm going to move on, I think, just right into the whitewater, though. I think we don't need to do that just yet. Cool. I'm going to delete this one, actually, and make a new one now that it's actually done rendering. Cool. All right. Moving on.